Hi guys! I don't know how to record this video. I am incredibly upset and I am very embarrassed. And I feel like the consequences of this screw up are going to be so big that it is just a real egg on the face moment for everybody in the movement. And we need to talk about that. Today I'm going to be talking about the Democratic primary for the Senate race in the state of Maine. I'm going to be talking about Susan Collins, Janet Mills, and Graham Platner. For those of you who do not know all of the actors in this race, I'm going to lay this out for you. Susan Collins is a 5-term incumbent senator from the state of Maine, which is a state that has been increasingly voting for the Democratic Party. Now, Maine state politics are a politics that tend to favor candidates that are independent, at least when it comes to representing Maine on the federal level. That is why the two people that are currently senators from Maine are a self-branded moderate Republican and an independent that caucuses with the Democrats in Angus King. Now, the person that has been picked by the Democratic Socialists of America, the person that has been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, and the person that kind of represents the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is a man named Graham Platner. He is 41 years old. He's very young. He is somebody that before this has not been involved in politics at all. He is an oyster farmer. He is a former Marine and contractor through Blackwater, which is the mercenary company that was very infamous during the era of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars for a lot of the horrific, evil things that they did overseas. But he is somebody who managed to get street credit among progressives by saying the right things. And Graham Platner has been saying the right things. He has been talking a lot about waste, fraud, and abuse within the Pentagon, about how the United States government should not be supporting countries like Israel when they are committing genocide and crimes against humanity. And he is somebody that supports a lot of social welfare policies like Medicare for All that I personally agree with. His opponent, Janet Mills, has not been outspoken on any of those issues, not nearly to the extent that Graham Platner is. She does not support Medicare for All. She is somebody that is supportive of Israel. She would not vote against arms going to the state of Israel, as it has been found guilty to be committing crimes against humanity. And she is somebody that we do not need more of in the Democratic Party. She is somebody that has been picked out by Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Central Campaign Committee to be the person who is the standard bearer for the Democratic Party. She's 77 years old. If she wins the Senate race in November, she would be 79 years old when she was sworn in. And by the end of her Senate term, she would be 85. I don't think that she is somebody that can win. And when Graham Platner criticizes the DCCC's losing strategy in Maine and them continually nominating people just like Janet Mills who lose important Senate races, Graham Platner is correct. And Graham Platner has a Nazi tattoo on his chest. What are you going to do about that? It's disgraceful. It's an absolute disaster. There's been opposition research coming out about Graham Platner for the last couple of weeks, regarding Reddit posts and social media comments that he has made in the past. And while many of these comments were inappropriate, they were not, as they have been characterized by people who are more of the center wing of the Democratic Party, as racist or sexist. They are more ignorant than anything else. And Graham Platner's response to these unearthed Reddit posts, I think, has been very appropriate and has been something that helps and does not harm his case for being a senator. He speaks about how after 10 years in the infantry, serving in the Marines, he was incredibly depressed, disillusioned, felt alienated, and he made comments and said things that he does not agree with today, and that people who know him today do not recognize those comments as having come from Graham. And I can believe that. And when I say he has a Nazi tattoo on his chest, I mean it. He has a Totenkopf, which is a skull and crossbones. It's a skull and bones tattoo that you see a lot of people that are Nazis have. It's something that was worn by the SS and a lot of people that, staffed the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. Now, he says that when he was in the Marines, that he took shore leave in Croatia and was drunk with his friends and picked out what he thought was a scary looking tattoo from the wall, from all the options that were there. And I absolutely believe that story. I believe that he did not knowingly get a Nazi tattoo. I think that he was stupid. But I think that this is indicative of such a lack of judgment and a such a lack of a quality of character in his lack of judgment that I do not want him being a senator. And we are at a position now where there's not really a winning outcome here. Because let's say that Graham Platner drops out and Janet Mills ends up, just getting rubber stamped as the Democratic nominee. I fully believe that she will lose to Susan Collins. Because Susan Collins, unlike Janet Mills, would not be 79 when she took her next term as a senator. She'd be 73. And that's a lot easier of a case to make than re-electing somebody or electing for U.S. Senate as a freshman, somebody that is 78 years old while the election is happening. And I think that in that situation, where Graham Platner were to drop out and Janet Mills would get rubber stamped and then lose the election, I think that a lot of people that are in the centrist pundit class in the DNC would say that the problem was not that Janet Mills did not have concrete policies that Mainers wanted, but rather that the problem was Graham Platner running in the primary to begin with, and that put a stink on the Democratic Party and on the Democratic nominee and made them lose a winnable race. And that's the wrong conclusion to draw from this. But it's going to be the conclusion that a lot of people draw from this. The other option is for Graham to stay in the race and to try and continue building the case for himself to be the Democratic nominee. And I don't know how he does that at this point. I'm going to say something that is probably going to get me in trouble at some point in the future if I try to run for political office. My honest assessment of Graham Platner is that this situation is best described as a white guy making shitty decisions that negatively impacts everyone around him. That's my best assessment of this situation, and I'm going to back it up with a story from my life. When I was 18 years old, I was in a bad spot. I had done incredibly well in schooling earlier in my life. I had done fantastic on standardized testing, and I was somebody that was earmarked as having a lot of potential. And due to circumstances outside of my control, I ended up going to 4 high schools in 4 years. I barely graduated, and I ended up in a position at 17 and 18, desperate and completely separated from the track that I had been on that would have allowed me to do the things I wanted to do with my life. My dream, and the thing that I felt was my higher calling, was to contribute to the field of science, specifically to the field of aerospace engineering and to aeronautics as a field. It was something that I loved. When I was a kid, I would put dozens of hours into Kerbal Space Program, and the thing that I wanted more than anything else was to be somebody that would design a component that would go on a space probe that would get sent to one of the moons orbiting Jupiter or Saturn. And I wanted to do that. And I felt that due to circumstances out of my control, I was being denied something that was my destiny. And at 18 years old, I decided that the only way that I could feasibly still get this was by enrolling in the armed services, was by joining the Air Force, doing a 6-year contract in it, getting out, using my GI Bill, getting a degree in hydroponics and aerospace engineering, and then pivoting that into doing some sort of work for NASA or another, like private space organization like SpaceX. But to be honest, I was always set on NASA. And I remember at 18 knowing the evil things that America had done in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I said to a lot of people that were on a server that I was in at the time that, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to contribute to a bad system. But I guess in order to do what I want to do, to be able to work for NASA, I need to directly or indirectly kill brown people for the United States government. And so I'm going to do that. And a lot of these older people that were in the anti-war movement, still are in the anti-war movement, that were progressives, a lot of people that would be, DSA members, a lot of people that follow the same shows that Graham Platner follows, they said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And they said, "You are making an incredibly bad decision, and I think if you go through with it, you are going to regret it, and that it's going to be something that haunts you, and that you're going to be making a very bad decision." And those adults were right, and I'm glad that they told me that. And I ended up not joining the Air Force or the Air National Guard. But the reason I didn't do that was not because of my moral character. It was because I knew the opportunities that I wanted, that I felt being in the armed services would afford me, were not going to be afforded to me. I realized that I was being sold a false promise. I realized that I was being lied to, and that I was not going to be able to use VA benefits to pull myself up out of a life of poverty and to give myself the opportunities I felt that I deserved that I was not being given. And I didn't make that decision because of my morality. I made it because of an immutable characteristic that I knew would deny me the benefits that would be given to other people who made the same decision as me. And that was why, largely, I chose not to join the Air Force. I ended up being in a position where I said, why would I choose to serve a country that hates me? And that might have been the correct assessment, but I still do judge myself a bit that I was so willing to participate in a system that would do so much evil. And I think we need to be looking at this as a cultural problem in the white community. I really do. And I think that we need to be telling our kids that they are in a position where it is easier for them to make decisions, to join things like the Army, like the Marines, like the Air Force, like their local police bureau. And that those opportunities are going to be more readily afforded to them. And that if they choose to join those organizations and to join those systems of power, that other people aren't going to trust them. And that they're going to be right not to trust them. This system, with this power imbalance, it makes us betray each other. And it enables us to be stupid children that make decisions that are going to haunt us. And it makes us able to get away from doing the work and the introspection, looking within ourselves, that we have to do in order to be credible, in order to be actually able to represent a movement that represents a mass politics that is designed to uplift people, that is designed to include everybody, gay people, transgender people, white people, black people, indigenous people, Latino people, Arabs, Muslims, Jews. The system makes us betray each other all the time. And we need to look at fixing a cultural problem. We need to be building a movement, and we need to have a movement if it's going to be within the Democratic Socialists of America. There needs to be a movement that is able to look at people like Graham Platner and to say, you need to answer for this, and I need to get a response for you as to why, years after you finished your last deployment within the Marines to go to Iraq, you decided to go back as part of Blackwater as a mercenary. And somebody like Graham Platner in the future needs to be able to have a credible answer to that. And more realistically, somebody like Graham Platner needs to have just made better fucking choices. That's the reality. Somebody like him needs to have made better choices. Because this is a candidate quality issue, and I don't think there's any way you get around this.